Hey everyone, this is Scott from the Scott Terrell Podcast. Welcome to our Series of Unfortunate Events Season 3 Thoughts video. I just finished watching the Season 3 of a Series of Unfortunate Events, which was added to Netflix today. That's right, I got up early, I binge watched the whole thing, and I just want to share my thoughts with you guys. So I'm just going to start off with my general thoughts about the overall season, trying to avoid spoilers in that part, and then I'll get on to talking about each individual episode, what I liked from each episode, and that will be heavy spoilers, so I'll be sure to mention it when I start talking about those things. But yeah, my overall thoughts about this season was I really enjoyed it just as much as the first two, but more because we get all the answers that we were given in the first two seasons of the show, and we get all, well, 99% of the answers to the questions that were kind of brought up in the first two seasons, in the first 8 books that we've already covered in these first, in the first 2 seasons, and now we get these final books in this final season, and we get a lot of resolutions, which was my favorite thing. We got a lot of old characters coming back, we get some new characters introduced, and I just really enjoyed this season for that, for all that stuff. I could not stop watching. I just hit play. I watched all 7 episodes of this final season, just all the way through. I stopped for lunch, which was about 3 minutes because I just had to microwave something, but otherwise I did not stop because I just really enjoyed this. I thought it was well paced. I thought it was such a bingeable show because you get just little pieces of these books, of these stories, but then they all come together in this overall story that you get at the end. And I just thought it did a really great job. Netflix did a great job with these first 2 seasons, and this 3rd season is just as good, if not better. I think it's probably, in my opinion, it's a little bit better just because we get all the answers that I've been curious about since we started this, since I read the first 8 books when I was younger. And so I was really excited to watch this season and get all those answers, get a bunch of the answers that I didn't know about. The only thing about these final ones that was a little tougher than the first ones was just I didn't have the book knowledge with me, so I didn't know what was like actually from the books and what was maybe made for the show specifically. As things like, you know, Carmelita came back for this season. I didn't know if she was in the books for the rest of the series or not after Proof of Prep. I can't remember or not. But little things like that. But that didn't really take away from the enjoyment of it because it was kind of fun to dive into these episodes that I didn't know anything about, into these stories that some people know a lot about because they had read those books, but I missed those last few books. So it was really interesting to get that that kind of fresh take on these stories and getting some Series of Unfortunate Events stories that I didn't know already, and getting a new take on them. So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed this season. So I'm just going to start talking about individual episodes now. So for those of you who haven't finished watching the season, you might want to tune out now because there's going to be a lot of spoilers. I'm spoiling everything. I wrote down all the stuff I really liked about this episode, or about this season, each episode that I liked in the season. Yeah, the first episode of this season, the Slippery Slope Part 1, I really enjoyed that one because like I said, that was where my knowledge of the books had kind of diverged. I didn't read the Slippery Slope or any of the ones after that, so I was really intrigued to get into this one. I thought it was a really great job of revealing a few mysteries that we were already curious about. Who survived the Baudelaire fire? We find out in this one it wasn't the Baudelaire fire they were referring to, because they didn't say Baudelaire fire. I don't know why I just said it, but who survived the fire? It wasn't Baudelaire. It was that 3rd Quagmire. That's right. The triplets are still triplets, even though that doesn't change the birth identity if one of them had already passed away. But he didn't pass away, so the 3 triplets are still alive. So that was a nice little thing. It also made me feel like, during the first 2, I kind of suspected that something, like the whole time they're kind of teasing that one of the Baudelaire parents may still be alive. I'm always like, there's going to be a twist here. Something's not right. This seems too straightforward. But at the same time, I didn't know what it could be. And the fact that it was, you know, a Quagmire, the Quagmire triplet being still alive was something I didn't even think of, and I should have. It's kind of obvious once you look back at it. It's just a little bit, not obvious, but it does make sense in a line of things. So I really enjoyed that part of it, that we get him, we get Carmelita back leading these snow scouts, who I'm just like, why are these snow scouts in this story? And then we find out at the very end of this episode with these 2 figures who at first I'm mistaken for being Olaf's mother and father, but in my defense, he does say mommy and daddy when they show up. But that, I guess, it's more of a like, oh my god kind of thing, as opposed to, you know what I mean? So that was a little confusing. I'm referring to in this the man with a beard with no hair and the woman with hair with no beard. Those 2, which I'm 100% sure those are from the books, because that kind of name is just very Lemony Snicket kind of name to give a couple of characters. So that feels like it's definitely from the book. And so those two characters, at first I mistakenly think that they're his parents, but I'm not sure. But they seem to just be his mentor, and or his mentors that had kind of taught him about being the villainous kind of character that we've known Olaf to be this whole time. So that was a fun part of this episode, that we kind of get introduced to these kind of random characters come out of nowhere. They're the kind of couple of the new characters I was talking about at the beginning of the video, about these new characters we get in the season. Another new character we get, who we kind of had a little hint to at the end of last season, who I thought was going to be somebody else than it ended up being, but that's Kit Snicket. That's right, Lemony Snicket has a sister too, so he didn't just have Jacques as a brother, he's also got a sister named Kit Snicket, which Kit's just I don't know, it's not much of a name, but anyways, Kit Snicket, who I enjoyed her character. She's pregnant the whole time, running around being a badass. And so that was really cool, kind of that introduction. Like I said, I didn't expect it to be a Snicket. I thought she was going to end up being like, I don't know, Beatrice or somebody, you know, but then Beatrice ends up being somebody else, which we'll talk about once we get to that episode, when we get that revealed, but that didn't happen in this episode. But yeah, this first episode of the season was super heavy on VFD acronyms, because the Baudelaires and the Quagmire triplet, that's Quigley, they have to kind of communicate at first kind of secretly, and then do that via a lot of VFD words, as well as they learn about VFD. So there's a lot of things obviously associated with VFD that use the acronym VFD besides just VFD itself, which we already learned meant Volunteer Fire Department. Okay, so some of the things I like about the second episode of this third season, the second part of the Slippery Slope, was we do get a little flashback of a young Olaf. We see a little bit of a scene with a younger Olaf and how he kind of ended up going down this bad path, just a little bit, not a whole lot. We get a lot more of that throughout this season, but this episode we get a little taste of that. What else do we have? Olaf's hench people were orphaned by fires. Oh, that was a cool little kind of discovery. So at the end of this, during this episode, Olaf's troop ends up like kind of turning on them, because Olaf wants them to throw Sunny off of an ice cliff. And they're all kind of just like, wait, what? No, that's a little far, man. Like, we've done some questionable things, but throwing a baby off a cliff, come on. And that mixed with some information revealed by the man with the beard with no hair and the woman with hair and no beard. They kind of revealed some information that the hench people kind of took and was like, hey, I was an orphan. We lost our sister, meaning the two ladies in the troop who we thought were twins are actually triplets, and they had lost their sister in a fire when they were younger, and they were orphaned. The same thing happened to them that happened to the Baudelaires, and they went down this other path. And so that was kind of really kind of cool, tiny little thing that they put into this episode that just kind of adds to these characters who I think in the books didn't really have didn't have that much of a backstory. But I don't know, like I said, I didn't read these other books. But that was just a really cool, interesting thing I liked in this one. We get some cool little things pop up in this episode. At one point we see a burnt up typewriter that said Snicket on it, and we're like, oh, because they were at the VFD headquarters, which was actually burned down in this episode. Before they get to it, it's actually burned down by the man with the beard and no hair and the woman with hair and no beard. So yeah, that was kind of an interesting little thing to get there. Not a baby. I don't know why I wrote that down. What else do I have written down? Late series backstory. That was just a fun little thing that Olaf says while the troop are kind of like turning on him, and they all end up leaving him except for the man with the hooks, which he has a little bit more of an interesting backstory when we get to the next episode, which we'll get to now just because I kind of mixed those first two episodes together a little bit. So I'm going to mix 3 and 4 together. 2, which is covering the book The Grim Grotto, which these episodes were really fun because the Baudelaires go in a submarine, which is somewhere they haven't been before. They've been on a boat, they haven't been in a submarine, so I like that it was a kind of a new environment. They're stuck in this environment. You think at first that they're going to be like safe because they're at the bottom of the ocean. How's Olaf going to get there? And then Olaf does, in his own kind of mischievous ways, with the help of the man with the beard and no hair and the woman with hair and no beard, who took a liking to Esme in the last episodes and decided to help Olaf, which is kind of a fun little thing in there that like Olaf's trying to gain their approval and Esme gains the approval without really trying at all. So that's a fun little thing, which also puts in a little bit of the divides for some, like, not divides, but tensions for some things that happen later in the season. That was foreshadowing, but I told you I'm talking spoilers for this season. Yeah, some of the things I like about this episode were we see a VFD submarine, which was sent to go find the sugar bowl, which had fallen into a river and then ended up in the ocean, so they had to go find a sugar bowl. The captain of the ship is a young person, like the same age as the Baudelaires, so there's a little tension there, especially between Violet and the captain, who's a young teenage girl, that's about the same age as Violet. So that was kind of an interesting part of this episode, because it also brings up the tension between, a little bit of a tension between Violet and Klaus, who kind of disagree on the course of action they go, disagree about kind of trusting this ship of the submarine captain or not. So I thought that was interesting. I always like that those times when they don't 100% agree, because they're siblings, and siblings don't always agree. Even these very rational, well-read Baudelaire children, they're not always going to agree. So I enjoy the times when they show that in the show, that they don't always agree. Sometimes they have different opinions on how to go about the situation they're in. And these episodes in particular were very much that, because, you know, Klaus trusts the captain, she doesn't, but Klaus also kind of has a crush on the captain, so it's a little like, come on, man, think with your head. But he's also a little young to not be. That's a little out there. But anyway, some of the things that were kind of cool about this, we get Phil from the mill back. He's just randomly there as a cook on the submarine, which is just a fun little thing. I don't know if that was in the books or not, but that was a fun little callback. We get a vigorously fraught dilemma, which, you know, VFD, I just love those VFD acronyms. Olaf captures the orphans again because he had a crazy octopus submarine, which I don't know how logistical that could be, but there's a lot of things in this universe that just does whatever they want. So anyways, there was the Great Unknown, which I thought was going to have a bigger impact in this episode, but didn't really, other than just spooking people a couple times. What else is there? Oh yeah, this is a big spoiler. Big kind of makes sense why this one henchman stuck with which was the henchman with hooks, which is, he's referred to as Hooky in a few of these episodes, but we also find out his real name is Fernald. I don't know if I'm saying that right either. I'm just like Olaf, I can't pronounce anything. But yeah, he turns out to actually be the brother of the captain, which we got a little bit of a hint to at the end of season 2, when they're at the carnival and they're getting their fortunes read, and he's told, actually that henchman, the Hooky, was told he should call his stepsister, which we find out is the captain of this ship, which is just I just love this really kind of crazy cool connection to it. We get a little bit of it, we get his backstory into how he lost his hand and how he'd actually been a part of VFD as well, and how, like, not everyone's wiki or noble is a really cool thing he says. Is, you know, not everyone's just 100%. It's not black and white. It's pretty much what he's trying to say to the orphans, who, up to this point, I've always seen it as very black and white. Everything is black and white. That, you know, Olaf's wicked and they're noble, and this guy's kind of throwing in this thing saying, well, no, maybe it's not all as, you know, simple as you guys think. So that was a really interesting kind of turn with this episode. What else? Quigley ends up getting the sugar bowl himself. We're still wondering up to this point, what's in the sugar bowl? What is it? Why does everyone want the sugar bowl? We don't learn that for a few more episodes. What else do I like in these episodes? Volunteer factual dispatch, which is what they call their telegrams. Just a cool, another acronym they use. Sunny infected by the mushrooms. Oh yeah, so there's in this episode there's the mycelial. There's these poisonous mushrooms introduced, which have a name, and Sunny ends up getting infected with it, which was a really interesting thing for them to introduce, the fact that one of them could die within an hour. Obviously, we know the Baudelaire is going to figure something out, which the solution ends up being something that they don't think they can work with because they can't find it, and then they find it. They find a substitute that works, and that was just really kind of just... It ends up being a really big part of the rest of this season, the fact that they discover these mushrooms, these really, really deadly mushrooms. And then, yeah, so this ends up giving these mushrooms actually had infected this, diving suit that Sunny had been in, and then the diving suit helmet then had the mushrooms in it, which now is a weapon, that Olaf plans to use against the VFD organization to get, to get his ultimate revenge because they turned on him and all this stuff, yada yada. But yeah, that was a really cool kind of thing about this episode. Sorry, I'm trying to look at my other notes. Hooky ends up helping the orphans escape after, the big reveal that he's, the captain's sister, or the captain's is his sister. So that was really cool part is that, you end up seeing this good part of this hench person who a couple times throughout the series we've kind of, had a little sympathy for because he's helped Sunny out. He's kind of been outsmarted by Sunny a couple times, but then he's helped Sunny out willingly a couple times, especially in this season. So it was great to see that he helps all of them and he has this kind of turn to the good and not being as abused by Olaf anymore. What else do we get in this one? Oh, I already mentioned Hooky's backstory. Quigley ends up giving the sugar bowl to some crows, some carrier crows, which I thought that doesn't seem like a great way to transport a sugar bowl. It's very fragile. Don't know if are crows strong enough to pick up a sugar bowl. I don't know. According to this show, they are though. Yeah, what else do I see? We find Mr. Poe and Kit Snicket at a beach. Don't remember that. Oh, the orphans end up washing ashore. That's what it is. Sorry, I binge watched this whole season today, so some things are blurring together. But yeah, the orphans end up washing on the beach after they've escaped from Olaf's clutches, and they have the choice between going with Mr. Poe, who still kind of thinks that they're, guilty. He doesn't think that they've committed these things, but he thinks that they should go to the police to try and figure this stuff all out. But the orphans end up going with Kit, who offers to take them to the last safe place, which is this hotel they're going to go to where all of VFD is meeting to have this meeting, which seems to be a trap for them. But the orphans end up deciding to go with Kit Snicket because they need their answers. They need to get a resolution to these unfortunate events that have been happening to them, so they have to go with Kit, or they decide to go with Kit in order to try and get this all done and over with. So episodes 5 and 6 are the penultimate peril, part 1 and 2, and these two episodes are so packed with so much stuff. This is where we get pretty much almost all of the answers that we've been kind of curious about up to this point, about the Baudelaires, about their parents, about VFD. So much background information between these two episodes because they're almost the last two episodes of one episode after the two of these. So yeah, we get so many answers. We get so many old characters coming back. We see, who do we see? I have them all written down. Here we end up seeing that vice principal from the prep school. We see Jerome. We see Babs from the hospital. We see the elders, a couple of the elders from the VFD town. We get a bunch of old characters back. Who else do I see? We see Larry, your waiter, only for a short bit because Olaf kills him, which is very sad, especially the way he does it. Dumps him into some hot boiling soup, which is just, ouch. Which is just, it's also a very sad ending for Larry, like who we've seen all this time. So yeah, this is a really great episode because we get all these characters back. We find out that Justice Strauss, another one of the ones who comes back in this episode, has spent this whole time the Baudelaires have been going through all these unfortunate events. She's been trying to gather all this information, trying to track them down in order to try and bring Olaf to justice, which, like I said, so spoilers again, people, for those of you who haven't watched this season. And Olaf gets away again. They try to put him on trial, but it's a sham because the two high court judges are actually the man with the beard and no hair and the woman with hair and no beard. And it was just like, I hated that I didn't see it coming, to be honest. I kind of did, but didn't. And they were like, the whole episode they're talking about Olaf, both of the episodes, they're talking about Olaf's up to something, somehow he's going to get out of this. And it turns out the whole time it was rigged because Justice Strauss didn't know that the two high court judges are actually the two most evil people around. They just kidnapped a bunch of children in the last episode, for God's sakes, which is something I forgot to mention. That's right, they burned down like half the city and stole all the rich kids' orphans to try and steal their fortune one day, which to this, still, it's one thing about this whole series that they never really explain is how just kidnapping orphans gets you their fortune. Olaf had one plan the whole time that could maybe work, which was he was going to marry his daughter, his daughter, the person he was a guardian of. that was his plan. That was the only one I could see how, yeah, I guess maybe that could work, and how the paperwork, I mean, would work. Otherwise, I don't see how the paperwork works, that the bank gives them money. But that's not important. That has nothing to do with these last 2 episodes, really. But yeah, we get a bunch of stuff. In the 6th episode, we see a flashback of the night at the opera, this event that they've been talking about throughout the whole series. These little drops of information here and there. The night at the opera involved, you know, both. Who was all there? So it was Lemony Snicket there. He was watching Beatrice perform, who we also see in this episode is played by Marina Baccarin, who is from just a bunch of different things: Deadpool, Gotham, Firefly, and back in the day, right? Which I was just like, that's a cool little bring-in for her to be in one episode in a flashback. That's kind of interesting because we also learn at the end of this that, well, it's something I've had a theory of throughout a lot of this while reading the books as well. And we don't get this confirmed until actually the next episode, but I'm confirming it now. Beatrice is their parents. Beatrice is their mom, and so it's kind of cool that their mom is kind of played by Marina Baccarin, so I like that. I like the fact that, you know, they don't out and out say that Beatrice was their mom at all. Never. They just hint to it the whole entire time until like the last moment of the show, which I'll talk about when I talk about the next episode. But yeah, so the penultimate peril, we see a flashback of that night at the opera. We see Olaf is there too, and he was there with Kit Snicket. They were an item. They were a thing. I was just like, what? What? Olaf was... That explains so much about his relationship with Jacques and why Lemony Snicket cares so much. So many things, and I just loved getting all this background information. And so that was a great part about this episode. Some of the other things we learned, I'm just checking out my notes. Olaf and Kit were an item. Olaf's in this flashback. We also see Olaf's actual dad, which is how I figured out that the beard man with no hat wasn't his actual dad. And his dad was the head of the OFD, the official fire department, the people who actually put out fires. But he ends up being murdered or killed by a poison dart, which Beatrice accidentally shot him with while she was stealing a sugar bowl, which we learn, again, we don't learn even in this episode what's in the sugar bowl. We don't learn that until the next episode, the very last episode. They wait to give you so many of the very, very fine answers until the last episode. But some of the other cool things about this episode, yes. But we see why Lemony Snicket was on the run and why he had to fake his death, and why this whole time he's been narrating things, and why him and Beatrice couldn't work out is because Beatrice accidentally killed Olaf's dad, but Snicket took the blame for it mostly. And so, he's on the run for the murder, but that's why Olaf wants to get revenge, because Beatrice killed his dad. And that just, explains so much, and just, it's such a great, that makes sense. I get a little bit more I get why Olaf's so mad at them, why he wants some kind of revenge on the Baudelaire so badly, is because their mom fucked up a little bit, which I thought was a really interesting thing they introduced in this last season, where the Baudelaires learn that the world isn't black or white, which I've already kind of mentioned. But yeah, they learn that, not everybody is noble or wicked. Not everyone is one or the other. Everyone's kind of a mix of both, and including their parents, which I don't think they actually learned that their mom was the one responsible. I can't remember exactly if they were told. I really binged through this really quickly. But yeah, what else do I have written down? Oh yeah, we also saw the VFD singers and the taxi driver from the lake. They showed up in the courtroom as part of the trial on Olaf, which ended up being turned on the Baudelaires, and they ended up being partly on trial, but that was again because the 2 high court judges were actually these 2 evil mentors of Olaf. This whole thing. But yeah, the orphans end up leaving and escaping the trial because everything's being kind of turning on them. They can't trust the law anymore. They thought they could. They went into this trial thinking that they could trust it, and they learn, Olaf's 2 mentors are the ones who are at the top of the justice system. So it's how can we trust the law? So they end up escaping, and they have to escape with Olaf, and it's just kind of that's really interesting kind of way to bring it up into the last episode, is that these orphans who have spent 3 seasons running from this guy, and now they have to be yep, we actually gotta go with him. Yep. And so they end up escaping with Olaf, or they actually help Olaf escape so that they could escape too. And yeah, that Sorry. But yeah, so they end up escaping with Olaf. Snicket takes the blame for Beatrice. Already mentioned that part. Oh yeah, at the end of this episode, we get another "Not How the Story Goes" song, which I thought was really fitting for this second to last episode, because I think that second to last episode is where the series ends, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not 100% sure though, because we get the final episode, which was referred to as the end at the beginning of it. It also has this little part at the very end of it that's called the last chapter. So I don't know if this was a separate book or if it was actually part of the series. I probably should have looked it up before I did this, but I'm going to do that after. Yeah. But yeah, some of the stuff I really like about this last episode, they had just escaped with Olaf. They're in a boat, stuck in the middle of the ocean, which, you know, they've kind of been in before. They're stuck in the middle of a big lake, not an ocean. This time they're stuck in the middle of an ocean or a sea. I don't know what the difference between ocean and sea are. But yeah, we see them kind of stranded, and they end up washing ashore a VFD-shaped island. And you're just like, well, this can't end well. So yeah, they end up being shipwrecked on this island, where they find this group of people led by this guy named Ish, or Ishmael, but he likes to go by Ish, who immediately recognizes Olaf and puts Olaf in a cage. And Olaf was just as Olaf's getting carted away in a bird to be locked up into a bird cage, is when he finally recognizes Ish, who turns out to be the missing principal from the preparatory school, and he ends up turning out to be the guy who founded VFD, the person who started VFD. He recruited students at the preparatory school who he thought were exceptional into this voluntary fire department to fight figurative fires. And it's just like, so many answers, so many questions. It makes so much. I just like how you can have answers to things and they just explain it all with this. And so I'm just like, oh, nice. That's a cool reasoning. Why not? But then Ish ends up trying to kill Olaf by shooting him with a harpoon gun, while Olaf's holding that helmet I mentioned before that had the scuba helmet that had the mushrooms in it. Olaf ends up getting shot by Ish, and then everyone gets poisoned by the mushrooms. And you're just thinking, they're on a desert island and they need horseradish, and they're like, So Ish and all the survivors, they just get on a boat and they sail off, hoping to go find some. And I'm just like, okay, well, that's one way to get all these people out of this story, so that we can focus on the Baudelaires and how they're going to solve their problem, which is they are also poisoned by it. And then they find, just as they get poisoned by it, guess what happens as well? Kit happens to freaking wash ashore on this island, and you're just like, okay, yeah, that's how this show works. This is how fate works in this show. But yeah, they also find out that their parents had stayed on this island and had built a house and had actually lived there for a period of time before they were born. And so they end up using that. I'm not going to spoil too much more of this one just because my brother's actually watching right now and I don't want to be too loud and spoil it for him. But yeah, we get the ending of the show. We learn that Kit was pregnant throughout this episode. We learn who the child ends up being. We get a little intro of that. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole show, this whole season. I don't want to spoil too much more, like I said. But yeah, that's my thoughts. This was a particularly long video. I'm gonna try to edit it, hopefully down a little bit. But yeah, thank you for joining me through this. I really, really enjoyed this season. I thought they did a great job ending off this series. And I'm kind of a little disappointed that I don't have any more new to watch, but I'll be excited to rewatch this in another month or two once I've had a little time to space myself from it. But yeah, be sure to let me know in the comments below what you guys all thought of the third season, the final season of a series of unfortunate events. Anything you liked or didn't like, and anything that was connected to the books that you liked or didn't like, or that was wrong or incorrect, that I might even got wrong or incorrect because I didn't read any of those books, remember. But thanks again for joining me today, and have a good one.